The 44 Magnum is not just another cartridge, it is a legend, a symbol of brute power, larger-than-life confidence, and a firearm that has inspired both fascination and fear. No other revolver round has carried so much myth and controversy. That's why we're here today to cut through the hype, sort the facts, and tell the real story of the 44 Magnum. Before talking about what it can do, we need to look at where it came from. And as with many great stories, it all begins with one man who just would not give up. That man was Elmer Keith, one of the most influential gun writers and experimenters of the 20th century. He was obsessed with the idea that revolvers could be pushed far beyond what the factories offered. His favorite playground was the 44 Special. Factory loads were mild, easy to shoot, but Keith believed the cartridge had far more potential. He spent decades creating high-pressure handloads, pushing velocities much higher than normal. His old Smith & Wesson triple-lock revolvers managed to survive the abuse, but it was far from ideal. Keith wanted a proper cartridge built to handle that power from the start, so he began lobbying. Year after year, he pressed Remington and Smith & Wesson to develop a factory version of his Hot 44 loads. He wanted something that hunters could rely on, a revolver round capable of deep penetration and serious stopping power. For nearly 30 years, he was ignored. Finally, in 1955, they listened. Remington introduced the 44 Magnum cartridge, and Smith & Wesson rolled out a brand new revolver to fire it. By early 1956, the gun was shipping to customers. That revolver would soon become famous as the Model 29. The 44 Magnum itself was basically a stretched 44 Special. The case was lengthened a tenth of an inch, so the new high-pressure rounds couldn't fit in older guns. Remington's first factory load was a 240-grain bullet at an astonishing 1,540 feet per second, more powerful than Keith had even requested. Smith & Wesson designed their revolver to be just as tough. The cylinder was longer, the steel was heat-treated, and the frame was built like a tank. Buyers could choose from barrels as short as 4 inches or as long as 8 3/8, all finished in deep blue steel, at $135 more than double the cost of a typical revolver. It was marketed as the best of the best. The 44 Magnum was aimed at hunters. Ruger joined the game with their Black Hawk single action, which was a little more affordable. By the 1960s, Marlin and Ruger were making rifles chambered in 44 Magnum as well. Still, the round was a niche product. It was brutally powerful, expensive, and more gun than the average outdoorsman needed. By the late 1960s, sales had slowed to a trickle. Smith & Wesson only produced small batches, and it looked like the 44 Magnum might remain a cult item for dedicated enthusiasts. Then came Hollywood. In 1971, director Don Siegel needed a revolver for his new cop movie, Dirty Harry. He contacted Smith & Wesson, but all they had available were long-barreled Model 29s. That's how Clint Eastwood's character, Inspector Harry Callahan, ended up wielding a 6.5-inch 44 Magnum on screen. The result was explosive. Eastwood's cool delivery of the line, the most powerful handgun in the world, made the Model 29 instantly famous. The audience were mesmerized. The revolver looked intimidating, sounded thunderous, and became the ultimate symbol of hard-edged justice. Almost overnight, demand skyrocketed. The problem was that Smith & Wesson hadn't kept any in production. When the movie hit theaters, dealers had nothing to sell. Used Model 29s began trading hands for 2 or 3 times their normal price. Owning one became a status symbol, proof that you had the Dirty Harry gun. But here's the funny part. A lot of people who rushed to buy one didn't make it past a single cylinder of ammo. The recoil was so harsh that many new owners fired 6 rounds, packed it back in the box, and sold it. The dream of being Harry Callahan quickly gave way to the reality of sore hands. Even so, the movie changed everything. The .44 Magnum went from a specialized hunting cartridge to a household name. The Model 29 was suddenly one of the most desirable revolvers in the world. No other firearm has ever received such a boost from a single movie. Through the 1970s and 80s, handgun hunting grew in popularity, and the .44 Magnum was right at the center. It dominated sports like handgun metallic silhouette shooting. Even as revolvers lost ground to semi-automatics in the 1990s, the .44 Magnum held on as the ultimate choice for those who valued sheer power. The story so far explains why the .44 Magnum is more than just numbers. It is a blend of engineering, persistence, and cultural impact, born from the vision of Elmer Keith, perfected by Remington and Smith and Wesson, and made legendary by Hollywood. It has become a symbol of raw handgun power. And that's just the beginning. Because once we move past the legend, we can start looking at what this cartridge really does, its power, its recoil, and the roles it plays today. The reputation of the .44 Magnum rests largely on one-word power. But what does that really mean? Power can refer to muzzle energy, penetration, bullet design, or just the raw experience of pulling the trigger. To understand where the .44 Magnum stands, it helps to compare it to the cartridges most people already know. A typical .44 Magnum revolver fires a bullet with around 800 to 200 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. That is far more than standard handgun rounds. A 9mm, for example, usually carries between 300 and 400 foot-pounds. Even a .45 ACP, famous for its stopping power, sits closer to 500. Step up to an intermediate rifle cartridge like the .556 NATO, and you'll find 200 to 2000 foot-pounds. So the .44 Magnum bridges the gap. It is vastly more powerful than pistols, but not quite a rifle. The story changes when you fire it from a rifle-length barrel. In a lever action like the Marlin 1894, the bullet gains hundreds of feet per second in velocity, pushing the energy into the lower rifle range. At that point, the cartridge competes directly with traditional deer calibers, at least within moderate distances. But energy alone doesn't tell the whole story. How the bullet delivers that energy is critical. With hard-cast, non-expanding bullets, the .44 Magnum penetrates deeply and straight, which is why it is often recommended for bear defense. On the other hand, expanding bullets can cause far more dramatic tissue damage, occasionally approaching what you would expect from a rifle. This versatility makes the .44 Magnum unique. It can behave like a sledgehammer or like a scalpel, depending on the load. There are cartridges even more powerful: .454 Casull, 500S and W Magnum, and others, but they are far less common. The .44 Magnum remains the standard by which heavy revolver rounds are judged. Of course, with great power comes great recoil. The .44 Magnum is the benchmark for handgun recoil, and for many shooters, it is right on the edge of what can be tolerated. How much recoil you feel depends on the gun. A heavy revolver with an 8-inch barrel and rubber grips will tame it somewhat. A lightweight snub nose with wooden grips will punish you with every shot. Ammunition matters too. Full power loads are brutal, while .44 Special or reduced recoil Magnum loads can be downright comfortable. Recoil is also personal. Some shooters can fire a box of 50 without issue. Others tap out after one cylinder. Technique makes a big difference. A firm grip and proper stance can soften the blow, while a loose hold makes the recoil feel like a hammer striking your palm. Even with the best setup, fast follow-up shots are difficult. The muzzle rise is significant, and recovery takes time. That said, firing one is an unforgettable experience, loud, dramatic, and unmistakably powerful. Is the 44 Magnum suitable for concealed carry? Not at all. The revolvers are too large, too heavy, and too punishing to shoot quickly. Carrying a full-size Magnum every day would be impractical and uncomfortable. There are countless better options for personal defense. The 44 Magnum is built for other jobs. What about home defense? A revolver chambered in 44 Magnum is far from ideal. The blast, recoil, and muzzle flash indoors can be overwhelming. Follow-up shots are difficult, and over-penetration is a real risk. If someone insists on using one, the better option is to load it with 44 Special. The reduced recoil and lower velocity make it far more manageable in close quarters. Interestingly, a lever-action rifle in 44 Magnum may actually be a solid home defense tool. With a 16-inch barrel, the recoil softens considerably, and the capacity is higher. For someone who cannot or will not use a semi-automatic rifle, it is a practical alternative. Where the 44 Magnum shines is wilderness defense against bears, mountain lions, or other large predators. It has a proven track record. Hard-cast bullets drive straight and deep, capable of breaking bone and reaching vital organs. Historical studies of bear encounters show that handguns, including the 44 Magnum, are surprisingly effective when used with proper shot placement. That said, recoil is still a limiting factor. Missing a fast-moving bear because the gun is difficult to control is a real concern. That is one reason the 10mm Auto has gained popularity. It penetrates well, offers higher capacity, and is easier to shoot rapidly. Still, the 44 Magnum remains a respected classic for those who want maximum power in the backcountry. The 44 Magnum was designed with hunting in mind, and it excels within its limits. With a revolver, most hunters consider 50 yards a practical maximum. With a rifle, 100 yards is reasonable. Beyond that, velocity and trajectory drop quickly. Compared to rifles, shot placement is far more critical. There is little margin for error. For medium-sized game like deer or hogs, the cartridge performs admirably. It delivers enough energy to ensure clean kills. Provided the hunter does their part, the 44 Magnum has earned its reputation through decades of use in the field. It is not the right choice for every role. It is too big for everyday carry, too harsh for most homes, but in the wilderness or on a hunt, it remains a powerful and reliable companion. The next step is to look beyond power and recoil and explore the practical details. How much does it cost to shoot? What barrel lengths deliver the best performance? And which guns stand out among the many chambered in this iconic round? Shooting a 44 Magnum is unforgettable, but keeping it fed can be a painful experience for your wallet. When the ammo market is stable, a single round of 44 Magnum usually costs about twice as much as 38 Special and roughly 4 times the price of 9mm. The good news is that 44 Magnum is still cheaper than many rifle cartridges, and availability remains strong because it has never gone out of production. One of the most common questions about the 44 Magnum is how barrel length affects performance. The answer is straightforward. The cartridge gains a lot of velocity in the first few inches of barrel, and much less after that. Going from a 2-inch snub to a 4-inch revolver can increase velocity by nearly 30%. Moving from 4 to 6 inches adds another bump, but beyond that, each extra inch brings smaller gains, usually 1 or 2%. By the time you reach a rifle-length barrel, all the powder is burned, and the cartridge is operating at its peak. A 16-inch lever action will often push bullets 400 feet per second faster than a 4-inch revolver. Interestingly, barrels longer than 16 inches may actually lose velocity because the bullet begins to slow down before leaving the muzzle. So, for revolvers, 6 inches is a sweet spot, while for rifles, 16 is ideal. Ask 10 shooters what the best .44 Magnum is, and you'll hear 10 different answers. At the top end, the German-made Korth Callahan is a masterpiece polished steel, exotic grips, and a price tag near $9,000. For the rest of us, there are plenty of excellent choices. The Smith & Wesson Model 29 remains the classic. Ruger revolvers have a reputation for toughness and come in both single and double-action designs. Colt brought out the Anaconda in the 1990s and has reintroduced it with modern refinements. Taurus offers some of the best values in big-bore revolvers. When choosing among them, weight and purpose are the key factors. A heavy revolver with an 8-inch barrel is easier on the hands, but tiring to carry. A lighter 4-inch model is more practical for hunting or wilderness defense, but kicks harder. Many experienced users end up with something in the 4-inch range, paired with a chest rig instead of a belt holster, to make the load more comfortable on long hikes. As for rifles, the Marlin 1894 is a standout. Ruger, which now owns Marlin, has been producing new versions that feel solid and well-built. Lever actions are smooth, easy to accessorize, and remarkably effective. Ruger has also produced bolt-action rifles in .44 Magnum, giving shooters yet another option. The .44 Magnum is mostly a revolver and rifle cartridge, but it has made appearances in semi-automatic firearms as well. The most famous, of course, is the Desert Eagle. Immensely large and instantly recognizable, it has become a pop culture icon in its own right. In .44 Magnum, it is surprisingly soft to shoot, though not always reliable. Ruger also experimented with semi-auto .44 Magnum rifles. The Model 44, also called the Deerstalker, was made from the early 1960s until the mid-1980s. It fed from a 4-round tubular magazine and inspired the design of the Ruger 1022. Later, Ruger introduced the 9944 Deerfield, a rotary magazine rifle that ran from 2000 to 2006. Both models were discontinued due to high manufacturing costs, but collectors still value them. It would be fascinating to see a modern revival, a semi-auto carbine chambered in .44 Magnum with contemporary design elements. The .44 Magnum is not just powerful, it is legendary. It was born from the persistence of Elmer Keith, shaped by Remington and Smith and Wesson, and elevated to immortality by Hollywood. It has taken deer in the woods, defended hikers from bears, and challenged shooters at the range with recoil that demands respect. Yes, there are bigger cartridges. Yes, there are cheaper and easier guns to shoot, but none have the same mystique. The .44 Magnum will always stand at the crossroads of myth and reality, part tool, part cultural icon. And so we end where the legend truly began, with that unforgettable line from Dirty Harry. The .44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world. Do you feel lucky?